live. Now, 2018, a new year and a new start to our Rid the Did Health segment. And you might remember last month, all the way back in 2017, we spoke to TV doctor Rangan Chatterjee about his new book, 4-Pillar Plan, Eat, Sleep, Relax and Move. And tonight we're going to be taking a look at two ancient practices, yoga and pooing. I know you're thinking, what, this time of the night? But, that's right. We're going to be joined by Pilates expert Nisha Srivastava to talk about how yoga can aid in digestion, keep your bowels healthy, and generally encourage good gut practice. I'm glad I didn't slip up on that. Welcome to the programme, Nisha. How are you?
Good, thank you,
Now,
Talat.
you've had a busy one because you just got back from India. You had having a month out there.
That's right. I always try and take a month every 2 years, Talat, to really connect and really see, what's going on over there. And really, when we think about yoga in the West, we sort of marketed yoga as the asana, and yoga over in India or in Pakistan or in Asia in general is their everyday life of how they roll the roti, how they collect their pani, their water, and how they live about their day-to-day duties. So it's good to go back and see, and then good to bring the information across here.
And refresh yourself, isn't it, as well, in the whole process. So for those who don't know, and I know lots of people do, but I don't need to belittle them, but what is yoga?
Well, yoga actually, of course, it originated in India thousands and thousands of years ago, and it was a practice of 8 limbs, and all the 8 limbs came together, and the whole purpose of yoga is to reach enlightenment. Now, in the West, and what most people market yoga through is the asana, which is the physical, and the idea is, Talat, that we do the physical in order to reach that stillness and that mindfulness. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. We're all attracted to different limbs. Some people want to do more meditation, more want to do more posture work, some will want to do more pranayama work. As long as we all enter through one way and we find the end results, that's all that matters.
Right, okay. Now, most people, think of yoga as beneficial for flexibility, which it is, but also you say it's good for the mind and soul. But how can it aid digestion then? How do you connect that?
Well, first of all, if we're looking at the asana part of yoga, we're looking at movement, and all movement actually pumps the body's oscillators. So when we pump the body's oscillators, and this includes everything from the heart to the blood flow to something called cerebral fluid in the spine, it also aids in digestion by keeping everything moving. Now, we come on to mindfulness with the yoga. Now, mindfulness to me is where we take a look back and we step back, and before reacting, we just take our time and observe something. So with the mindfulness, if we have a more mindful practice, as they do in Asia with their food, we will have better digestion. So when we eat and when we're all rushing around, and I do it myself, I'll rush my food. The first thing you should always do, and you see people all the time in India and Pakistan doing this, they play with their food on their plate. So they feel the food, they look at the food, they smell the food. And this in response gets a salivary reaction in the mouth, and it gets the gastric juices going in the stomach to prepare us for the food. Then when we chew the food, we should be chewing each bit of food from anything from 20 to 37 times before we digest it.
Right, actually that's a good point though, because sometimes we, certainly myself, in the habit, because you're in a rush, you're gulping the food and not really chewing it and just swallowing and ready for the next piece too, isn't it? And so we should take our time.
Yes, we should take our time. And there's a famous man who made this famous called Horace Fletcher. So Horace Fletcher was grossly overweight, and he applied to get life insurance, and he went away and learned to chew his food, and he chewed everything to virtually a liquid form, and he lost 40 pounds, and then he was accepted by the life assurance company.
Wow.
So when we chew our food, Talat, it has a better way to digest. We have a better response, and it will take more time going through the body. If we're drinking a lot of fluid with our food, it tells me that everybody's eating too fast because we've not got those gastric juices ready from the stomach, and we've not got that salivaric reaction.
Yeah, and actually in the Islamic community, I believe that they're also told that they have to chew their food 32 times, I believe. And it's a practice I think Prophet Muhammad used to carry out, to chew the food each morsel 32 times in order to digest, so easily digests, and also and to leave a bit of hunger and enough to have some water and always leave a bit of hunger so that you're not overburdening your body.
Yes.
There is a science to it.
Yes, there is.
Some people practice it.
Yes.
Clearly, I don't.
Yes.
But when you say that to people, are they like, oh my God, but you just want to get through your, burger and chips? That's not a good example of, healthy food. But you know what I mean. Well, so how do you overcome that, though?
Well, what I'd say is, Talat, are they happy in their life and their body? Have they got any illnesses, complaints? Do they feel tired? Do they feel sluggish? Do they have the energy? If they've not, they've got to take a step back and address their health, because we all have to take responsibility for our body, and we're all used to passing it on to everybody else. So once we take responsibility, we've got our foundations from there. And when you've got firm foundations, you can build that house.
Well, clearly my foundations have been crumbling, as you can see. And, I've, in the past couple of months, I've actually put on weight. Yes. So I almost coming up to a stone, I reckon, from the last time. And the last time I came to your studio and we did a Pilates session and we talked about that. But I did all right, though, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
I was all right,
brilliant.
We had that video that we put up on Twitter as well. Speeded up version of having the exercise as well. And everyone was commenting on my boxer shorts there, cheeky fellas. But within that, you were also talking about the flexibility of the Asian body. Yes. And I remember when I was crouching down, and it said, well, not many people can do that, and you can still do that. That's a good thing. And that's an Asian trait, apparently.
It is. Well, when you go, of course, in the old days, everybody in Pakistan and India used to do the toilet squat. And the toilet squat is the best way to evacuate our poops, because the knees come above the hips and everything can clearly go out. Now most of India and Pakistan has moved to the modern toilet, and it's not as efficient. In the old days, people would put yellow pages underneath their feet to raise their knees above their hips. Now you can get like a potty squat, which you can put underneath your feet, but ideally that's what you do. And if you look at children, Talat, when children want to empty their bowel, they sit on the toilet and they bend forwards, and there's a reason they bend forwards. It's to get that evacuation, so it's very, very important.
Right, so those people who sort of poo-poo the idea of actually having the hole on the floor, exactly, no pun intended, Race. Yes. But there you go. Clearly I've been practicing for years, hence I could do the squats. Yes. But you are right though, because when travelling abroad, I do prefer that. In most households you'll have both versions. The seat and the hole in the ground. But it's so much more easier and convenient.
It is.
And you're absolutely right, it flushes the body.
Yes.
So in terms of our poop as well, consistency, and I know some people might be having their tea now and thinking, what are they talking about? But what should it be?
Well, actually, Talat, we should pass 12 inches of poop a day. That's really, really important. And it doesn't matter if it's in one drop or in 3 separate drops.
Right,
and when you eat a meal, what usually should happen is you should go to the toilet within 30 minutes to an hour, because your bowels should be preparing for the food coming in the stomach, and they know that's coming. Now, if your poop is staying inside you, it becomes toxic. And an interesting fact I picked up from a cadaver lab is when John Wayne, the cowboy, died, and they did his autopsy, they found 40 pounds of poop stuck in his large intestine. Right. So it remains toxic in the body if we don't pass it. Now, on the other extreme, we've got a lot of IBS going on, and if it's passing through too quickly, we're not obtaining the vital nutrients. And some of us may suffer from something called leaky gut syndrome. So when we have leaky gut syndrome, it's also known as semi-permeable gut. We're not absorbing those, vital nutrients. So it is 12 inches a day if we're eating right. If our poops stink...
And now, the question I'm going to ask you is, how do you know how many inches of poop you've done? You're not going to be down there with a measuring tape or anything. So how are you going to know?
You should. Well, everybody should be observing their poops, and it's a very British thing where we don't want to look at our poops. So as soon as you've been to the toilet, you should observe your poops and work out, because your poops are a teller of all disease, injury and illness, Talat. And, it's the first signs of not being well. And you hear this so many things through the NHS, advertising, if you find this in your poop, if you find that. I'm going to go a step further and say stinking poops, stinking thoughts. So if you've got stinking poops, that's a reflection on the gut bacteria. And there are so many medical papers out there now, and I found 11 the other day relating our gut, or our GIT as they say, which is gastrointestinal tract, to our brain, because the gut or GIT and the brain is produced and made from the same part of the embryo in embryology. So we call it our second brain. So when people are not making the right decisions at home, your boss might be making the wrong decisions at work, depression, suicide, schizophrenia, it could be coming from the gut. And when we look at things like depression, suicide and schizophrenia, I always say to people, smell that person's breath before they've done their deed or whatever they were going to do, and see, did they have bad breath? Were they complaining of stomach pain or stomach problems? Because if your gut bacteria isn't right, it's going to affect your mind, and that's when I say stinking thinking, stinking poops.
Right. And when you're talking about breath, what's that an indication of? Bacteria in the mouth, or is that coming from the esophagus?
Yes, I would say it's coming from the whole gastrointestinal tract. There will be some in the mouth, but it's a reflection on what's going on. And of course, we can treat the symptoms by buying all these mouthwashes, but we're not treating the cause. So seeing a naturopathic doctor or a functional medicine specialist would be ideal, and learning to treat from the root cause, and learning from Dr. Chatterjee's The 4 Pillars, because that really is amazing. He's teaching people to take responsibility for themselves rather than pass it on to others.
Right, okay. Now, in terms of then yoga, what basic forms of exercise should people be doing in order to get them slowly into the habit?
Yes. Well, in the habit, all movement promotes oscillation and promotes pumping. So when we move healthily, we breathe healthily, we sleep healthily, we eat healthily, we're going to have optimal digestion and pooping. But we also need to look at the quality of our food and what we're eating.
Okay. Clearly, there's lots of information there. So if people need more advice, or how can they get hold of you?
They can contact me through my website, which is pilatesmanchester.com. I've got so many articles on my blog with lots of free information. I always say, Talat, one size, doesn't fit all. So we're all different. Yeah. And again, I heard you mention about North and South India. Well, the different parts of the world we're from will revolve around the different diets. So, for example, people who were Quechua Indians had a 90% carbohydrate diet. Now, by carbohydrates, I don't mean the bread and the stodge we have today. I mean plant-based. Then if we look at Eskimos had a 90% meat and, fish diet. So that was high protein and fat. Now, if you look at people in Alaska now, there's a high case of diabetes because of the amount of carbohydrates that they're eating, and it's not carbohydrates. Now, if you look at somebody like Reese and I, who are half Asian and half, have half Asian and half other cultures in us, you've got to assess that and see, are you eating right for your metabolic typing rather than following the banana diet, this diet, that diet.
And well, I'm Punjabi, so we have lots of rotis.
Oh, yes.
So that's, carbs and plenty of rice. So
yes.
Do we need to sort of balance that out in the quantities that we eat? Or?
What I'd say, Talat, there's something called the GI index, and you mentioned you put on weight. Now, when people put on weight and I look at their diet and they say to me, I'm eating healthily and I'm exercising every day, but I'm actually putting on weight. And what most people have done, Talat, is they've cut out their sugar. Now, we never get fat eating fat, and I'm a great believer of cooking in ghee, the traditional way. But what I'd say is that white rice has a white starch, and it's actually high on the GI index. So a GI index tells us, what the percentage is of sugar, which will affect our insulin on our glucose release. So wheat is one of the worst things. So I say to people, if you're going to have, your roti and your rice, try and have 2 rotis. Look at the, the flour that you're making it with, and try and stick to your carbohydrates, which grow above the ground because they have a lesser, no glycemic index. Anything which grows below the ground is high glycemic index. And I've got some stats for you, Talat, so you'll be shocked on these stats.
Okay.
Whole wheat bread has a GI index of 72, so that's extremely high. Plain table sugar has a high index of 56 to 65. Right. Now, if we compare that to kidney beans, it's 51, and if we take it to salmon and walnuts...
Okay, Nisha, we're running out of time.
Yes.
Very quickly, your website?
Is pilatesmanchester.com.
All right, Nisha, thank you.